It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Well, hey there, hi there, ho there. You're as welcome as can be. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. Thank you for joining us. Nice to have you with us. We've got a double header today. In the old days, they used to have double features at the mom and pop movie houses. I don't know if they still do that, but we've got a double feature for you today. We've got two guests, two interviews. First one up is Sharon Wilharm, and she's a Nashville-based female filmmaker. And she has a new film out called Summer of 67, which will release theatrically on June 29th. And she will tell us all about that and a bit about the business of filmmaking and distribution and all that fun stuff. She will be up first, followed by Chuck Roy. Chuck Roy is a stand-up comedian. He's also a teacher at a community college in Denver. Notably, he has been in the film with Ralphie May, the late Ralphie May, called Filthy Animal Tour. And he was also on Louis Anderson Presents. He was in a couple of classic TV sitcoms like Will and Grace and Third Rock from the Sun. He will be up in the second half of the show. So, not a lot of time to chit-chat or dilly-dally, as my grandmother used to say. We will be right back with Sharon Wilharm. Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Sharon Wilharm. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm doing good. And you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Let's see. You are a filmmaker, indie filmmaker, based in Nashville. Yes. And you've got a new film coming out on June 29th called Summer of 67. Was there another film with that title? Because that sounded awfully familiar.
Well, there was Summer of 42.
Okay, I remember that one. Yeah. But not Summer of 67, no?
No, there's not been anything. There's been like TV episodes, but not another movie.
Okay. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, give us your background and how you got involved in making film, and then we'll talk about the film. Okay,
sounds good. Well, I kind of accidentally fell into it. Growing up, it was not something, I know so many people that they always wanted to make movies, but I was a bookworm. But then when I got married, my husband had a degree in broadcast communications, but then didn't end up doing anything with it. He was a business owner. And then after we'd been married about 10 years, he decided he was going to make a documentary about our local town. We had moved to a small town. It had a historic district, really a great history. So he was just going to do a documentary about that. And as he started doing his research, he said, it'd be really cool to turn this into a narrative film. Why don't you write it and direct it and all that? Well, I was a journalist. I knew journalism. I had never looked at a screenplay. I knew nothing about screenwriting. I had directed drama at church, but not film or whatever. But we did that first movie. It was interesting. And then there was a long gap. And then in 2010, we did another movie. And then this Summer of 67 is our seventh. And with each one, we've learned, we've grown, we decided if we were going to make movies, we were going to work hard to study to make them the best we could be. So that's where we're at now.
Tell us a little about your first film. I'm curious what that was about.
Well, since it started off as it was just going to be all these different stories about the town. And so he's like, let's put it all together. And we had at the time, we went to some kind of concert they had downtown, and there was this young girl that had music that we really liked. It was contemporary Christian. And so we're like, oh, well, we'll just incorporate that into our soundtrack and make a whole soundtrack out of it. And she thought that was cool and everything. So we basically wrote the script around her music. But the silly thing is I don't know why neither one of us occurred to us that we didn't have to use an entire song. So we literally have like 4-minute montages with nothing really happening. It was a very slow-moving, boring movie.
Oh, I see. You didn't just use clips of her song. You put the whole song in, yeah?
Yeah, I don't know what on earth we were thinking, but we had a lot of interesting stories. Basically, my character came into town and all these people shared stories, and yeah, it was an adventure. It was called Homecoming.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because the only film that comes to mind where they actually used the entire song was the Beatles anthology. I think because, well, for one thing, it was, 9 or 10 hours long. But also, I think people would have been offended if they had cut the Beatles songs up, you know, because they wanted them in their entirety. So they used the whole song. But when I first watched that was the first thing that came to my mind, is like, oh, they used the whole song, not just, 20 or 30 seconds of it. So
right.
It's not entirely bad to do that. It certainly is considerate to the artist not to chop up their songs, but it could make for a slow-moving film, yeah. Okay, so now you're up to your 7th film, and it's called Summer of '67. I did see the trailer, and it looked very interesting. I'm anxious to see it when it comes out. How did you do this story? Tell us about this. How did this one come about?
Well, now this one is actually based on real events. My dad was on the USS Forrestal in 1967 when it caught fire. And growing up, I had heard my parents talk about it. Not a lot, but I knew that, something had happened with Daddy on I thought a ship. Later I discovered a ship and a carrier aren't exactly the same thing. But anyway, when I got older, I started, asking a few questions, and they were sharing more. And the thing that really struck me is that he was on this, on the USS Forrestal. They had the fire. There was news, on the radio or TV about it. But it was 3 days before my mother found out whether he was alive or dead. And I just imagined her being this young wife and, with this baby. And, she can hear the news. She knows something has happened, but having to wait those 3 days to find out, whether he was going to be all right. And so that just really, I don't know, it just really hit me. And so when we were working on a new film, I'm like, I want to cover that, what it was like being those women. And plus, like right now, we have all these, protests and turmoil and all this stuff going on. And so I'm like, we've been through this before with the 60s. And so I just wanted to kind of educate like the younger crowds of, hey, history tends to repeat itself. We went through all of this with the 60s. We're going through, similar things now. And I thought this story would be a great way to just kind of enlighten people to what the Vietnam War was like and what they went through.
Now, are you shooting this yourself, or do you hire a crew to do it?
Well, my husband and I work together. I handle the stuff that goes in front of the camera. I write it, I direct it, I work with all the actors. He is a cinematographer and editor, so he handles the technical part. Then we do have a crew. This particular time, we had a lot of young college film students that were really eager to learn. So we were not just having them as part of the crew, but also kind of training them because they wanted the experience. And, we weren't just having them do it, but we were explaining why we're doing it. And so we do have a crew. It's not like a Hollywood crew. We have a small crew. It ranged. Some days we would have a crew of maybe 5 or 6. Other days closer to 9 or 10.
Now, since this is a period piece, where does one find all the vintage clothes and cars and furniture and all of that to make it look like 1967?
Well, we started shopping literally a year in advance. When I started working on the script or, some process, we started shopping. we live in a Victorian house. And so interestingly enough, a lot of times we were having to buy newer stuff to put in our house because a lot of the stuff we had was too old. So our characters live in our house, but we made it 60s. And it was a lot of fun. At the time, we were going to film festivals with our last film, so we would travel all over the country. Everywhere we went, we would pick up pieces. And then our favorite find was a couch and a chair that was so perfect 60s. It was just alongside the road one day. We were just driving by, and it's like, oh, that's our couch that we've been looking for. So we got a free couch and chair that nobody else wanted, but was perfect for the 60s. It was ugly.
Well, I was a little kid during the 60s. I think in 67 I would have been 5 years old. And I do remember that. And then it just got worse into the 70s with all those avocado green kitchens and burnt orange shag carpeting and all that. Oh, it was terrible. Yeah. And then the clothes, the clothes actually weren't bad in the 60s, but in the 70s they got really bad.
Yeah, now the young actresses loved the clothes. Oh my goodness, they had so much fun. And I also made a lot of the clothes. I sew, and so I got a lot of vintage patterns and vintage fabric and made a lot of them. And they really enjoyed the 60s clothes.
So how long has this film been in the works? This sounds like it was a pretty arduous task you guys took on.
I guess it's been like 2 years, because there was a year of the pre-production, of the writing it, the preparing for it. Last year at this time was when we were filming, and we finished filming last June, and then we've been doing post and getting it ready for the release ever since.
Do you have a distribution deal, or are you just doing this on your own?
We are probably, at this point, we're mostly doing it. We have a friend who basically acts as a sales agent. In the past, we've done distribution. We've also done self-distribution, and we're leaning in the self-distribution for this one, just because that way we can kind of sub-distribute, where we have somebody that handles the DVD sales, somebody that handles the streaming or the different TV, and just maintaining control.
Okay, explain the process a little bit for people, especially somebody who's listening who might be an up-and-coming filmmaker. They don't exactly know, okay, now I just made a film, what do I do with it? How do I get it out there? So explain that process a little bit.
Yeah, that is the hardest thing. When you're first in, you really do need a distributor. Once you've been doing it a while, you make connections and you can handle more yourself. We've never had a problem getting a distributor. We've been very fortunate. Our films have been in the Faith film market, and so it's a pretty small market, and we haven't found it that difficult. A lot of times we just start making the movies. We've done film festivals and we're out there, so a lot of times we just have the distributors contacting us. If not, you just have to, the best advice is to find films that are similar to yours, find out who is distributing it, and then contact that distributor to see if they might be interested.
So if somebody makes a film, where does it go? Does it go to Netflix? Does it go to immediately to DVD? How does that work?
Well, there's a lot of different windows, and the smaller you are, the more you have to follow the windows. If you're a big studio, you can kind of make your own rules. But in the indie world, pretty much, if you're going to do a theatrical release, that has to be first. The theaters want you to have at least 3 months from the time that you release before it's available on any of the, main home entertainment, like whether I think it can be on TV during that time, but it can't be on DVD, like on Amazon or Netflix or any of those for 3 months. Generally, you start with where you have more control, like with the DVD sales, or where they're like renting it digitally, and then Netflix would be the last, because then you're just getting like a lump sum. And so each of those has their windows. Netflix right now, everybody's saying is you pretty much need to have big stars to get into Netflix. But there's a lot of other smaller streaming services that are available. And things are changing so much. Like just in the past couple of years, DVD is kind of dying. So there's less DVD markets than there used to be, which is kind of sad because I personally like DVDs. I like a tangible product.
I have to agree with you.
Yeah. So it's constantly changing, but that's pretty much what you have to do. Having a theatrical release, even if it's just one theater, makes a big difference as far as what you can do later on. Everybody likes to have the distributors like it when you've had a theatrical, even if it's just one theater. It just makes a difference.
How hard is it to get into a theater? Because aren't most of them franchised now? I mean, I don't think there's that many mom and pop theaters anymore, are there?
No, and actually the mom and pop a lot of times is harder to get in because they only show one or two movies, so you're competing against Star Wars and, all the big studio. But with our last movie, we got into, AMC has a program called AMC Independent, which is where independent films they pick so many, and then they kind of walk you through the theatrical process, and they contact the theaters, and they handle all this. And it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us when we got picked for that. We were able to screen at AMC Empire in Times Square and in LA.
Wow.
And other places. It was kind of interesting, though, because we're in Tennessee, and at the time there were no AMC theaters in Tennessee. So we were screening around the country, but not in our home. And now, this year, we're in Regal because we have a filmmaker friend who had connections with Regal, so he was able to get us there. And then we've got some other theaters that we're doing like one-night screening, but it's really hard to get into theaters.
Well, it seems like it's similar to music with everything gone indie. It's easy enough to record a song, but then what do you do with it? You can put it out. You can put it out on Spotify. You can put it out on iTunes or something. But then the trick again is to get people to notice it. So I think Netflix is big enough now where if you can get on Netflix, you're going to get people watching your film, just because it's huge. But some of the smaller ones, on top of that, you have to do marketing, correct? I mean, even once you get your film out, you've got to, advertise it, promote it.
Definitely. That's one thing. So many people think once you make a movie, the work is done. No, the work is just beginning.
It's only
yeah. And like you said, we have one film that's on iTunes, and I have no idea if anybody's, ever really watched it. I guess somebody has, but, it's so lost there that you pretty much have to be looking for it. It's easy to get lost on iTunes or some of those other platforms because if people don't know you're there, they're not going to stumble upon you.
Well, that's true enough. Now, you did say something that I wanted to just go back to. You said that Netflix just pays a lump sum. So if you get on Netflix, they just pay you a lump sum, and then you don't get any more money from them?
Oh, well, it's for a period of time. It's like for a year to 3 years. So they're buying it for that amount of time. But you don't get paid for like each person that watches it.
Oh, I see. It's not paid by play. It's just okay.
Right.
I don't know. I think I would take that because then if nobody watched the film, you'd still get paid.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice. But everything we're hearing is it's gotten a lot harder in the past couple of years to get on Netflix because you're competing with so much, and, they only have, I guess it's kind of an unlimited amount of space they can have, but they are getting pickier.
Well, Netflix is, they're getting bigger anyways. As a corporation, their stock is going through the roof. And, it's just, I think it's the wave of the future. I think, like you mentioned earlier, DVDs are dying. Certainly CDs are dying for music artists and have been for a number of years. Now everybody's streaming. And I think that it's just a matter of time before, well, even TV has gone that way. Now it's smart TV. There's a fine line between your computer and your TV set. At this point, you can pick up YouTube and all of those right on your TV. TVs are interactive. So the idea of a DVD is as sort of charming as it is to have a nice shelf with all of your titles right in front of you. People would rather just pull it up on a menu on the screen and see, 10,000 titles. Oh, here, I'm going to pick that one. It is going that way. And I know that Netflix has gotten huge over the last few years. I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is that on your bio, you mentioned that you're a Christian filmmaker, and I think there was something here, Faith Film Industry. Is that meaning that your films all have a religious message, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, I mean, I am a Christian. I think everybody who makes a movie, or your music or a book, it reflects who you are. It reflects your worldview. So all of my movies reflect who I am, which is going to have, elements of my faith, because it would just be hard for me to write a story where it's not going to be a part of it. But like with this one, it's a little bit, it's not like hit you over the head or anything with it. It's just that I have characters who are Christian. I have characters who aren't Christian. It's just religion is a part of their life, and their relationship with God is mentioned. With Summer of '67, a theme is that God is there for you through the trials. And so, if you don't believe in God, you can still watch the movie. It's not going to take away from anything. Or it might make you feel like, hey, I'd like to have somebody going through these troubles with me. If you're a Christian, you're going to say, yeah, I've been through that. I understand that. It makes sense.
I know that there is so many different genres now, and in music as well. There's Christian rock, there's Christian alternative. I've seen all of that, and I didn't know exactly what that meant, if it meant that it had to have a religious theme in order to qualify to be in that genre or not. So.
It's kind of confusing because there's a lot of debate as to what makes up a faith-based film. And just for me, I just consider it, if it's made so that is an element in it. But we're not really, for Summer of '67, I would say it's more of a romance. It's a drama. It's just God is there. He's there.
The last thing I did want to ask, I said that the last time, so this will be the last one I ask, was we were talking about DVDs, and I've had many filmmakers on in the past, and they said that Walmart is sort of the last vestige of massive DVD sales. If you can get your DVD into Walmart, you're going to do great. Would you agree with that, or have you tried to get your films into Walmart at all?
It is considered it is the big place for DVDs. Unfortunately, I've known quite a few filmmakers who the distributors got them into Walmart and they never got paid a dime. Wow. So they watched their movies sell all over the place. It wasn't Walmart. I'm sure Walmart paid the distributor, but they didn't get paid from their distributor. And so I've heard multiple distributors and multiple filmmakers with that story. And so I don't know what the deal is. I really don't know, but I do know that everybody wants to get into Walmart because it is considered the big DVD space.
Right. It's still like the last place where they'll go and they'll buy DVDs from there.
Yes.
Where, like, you remember Blockbuster?
Yes.
All those are gone now. And I don't know if there's even DVD rental stores around anymore, are there?
There's Family Video that's still around. It's kind of a small regional. I know it's throughout the Southeast, and I think we've seen it in the Midwest, but I don't know how big it goes. They tend to be in rural areas, I guess, where a lot of times internet may not be as good. So people that have slow internet still need DVDs. True.
Streaming on a slow internet connection is a real pain.
Yeah.
That's a real drag. Your film is called Summer of '67, a Vietnam War love story. It premieres. Where's it coming out on June 29th?
At the Regal in Nashville at 100 Oaks Mall. And then we'll be doing like one-night screenings at other places, at some other theaters, churches, community events. And if they go to our website, they can see, and we'll be adding more locations. We'll be touring with it basically until Veterans Day. So throughout the summer, we'll be doing one-night screenings.
Okay, and then is it going to go online at some
Yes,
point?
Veterans Day will be when we'll
Veterans Day.
release
Okay.
home entertainment.
Oh, great. Okay, super. Well, Sharon, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you for telling us about your film. Sounds interesting. I will definitely watch it when it comes out. Best of luck. And do you have any plans to make another film at this point, or is this one going to consume all your time for a while?
This one's going to consume our time for a while because we're really spending the next year just promoting it, marketing it. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Go listen, download, and subscribe to The Douglas Coleman Show. It's available at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. Also on iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube. The Douglas Coleman Show is an internationally syndicated talk and music show that features fascinating and sometimes famous guests from all aspects of the entertainment industry. The topics can range from light and fluffy to sober and serious. Our focus is on music artists, but we also feature producers, authors, directors, and even promoters. The Douglas Coleman Show. Sometimes chat, sometimes music, always entertaining. Again, it's available today at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. You can also connect with them on Facebook at Douglas Coleman Show 1, follow on Twitter at Douglas Coleman 3, and you can even find them on TuneIn Radio. Again, that's the Douglas Coleman Show at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and more. Go listen, download, subscribe, and share with your social networks today.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
After the loss of my dog Mandy, I had difficulty sleeping. She had been my best friend for years. She slept on the end of my bed, and I found her snoring soothing. It was difficult for me, as I also found little support for my grief. Not being able to sleep was the worst. I decided to create an audiobook to help people like me. Listen to my voice as you drift into a peaceful sleep, taking a journey using your dog's memories, accompanied by rain falling, birds singing, and a waterfall. To get your download, go to Amazon and search Relax by Jane Yates. Thanks to Douglas Coleman for this spot.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's EPPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me this spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
I take a 7.5.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Chuck Roy. Hi, Chuck. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. Good morning, everybody, and hello. Thanks for having me on the program.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. I watched your YouTube video of one of your stand-up routines, and I I definitely had a laugh, so, that was good enough to get you on the show.
Good. Thank you.
Before we talk about your stand-up and all of that, give us just a little bit of your background so people kind of know who you are and where you came from and how you got to this point in your life, and then we'll talk a bit about comedy.
Oh, sure. I think the easiest thing to say is I was raised in New Hampshire, flunked out of college, and became a stand-up comedian. And 25 years of telling jokes. And about 5 years ago, I landed at the Community College of Denver, where I teach the comedy class, and have discovered my sort of inner teacher nerd and enjoying that twist of fate.
Okay, so you teach... I assume that's your job, your day job, if you will, then, yeah?
Yeah, which is fun for me. I teach comedy and introduction to the entertainment industry, 2 separate classes. And I love the concept of teaching comedy because it comes with a lot of the challenges. Like people say it's impossible. And, one could say becoming a stand-up comedian in the first place is pretty impossible. So I love the challenge of overcoming the concept that you can't teach this stuff, which, I certainly can. And super fun to do it on a college level.
Well, you kind of beat me to the punch on that one because I was going to mention that. I was going to bring that up, actually, and say, how does one teach comedy? Because for my opinion of comedy, it's about timing. And
and the way I teach that is I have students almost on day one, definitely on day one, get up in front of the class and introduce themselves. And if they don't have jokes, then they've got to at least say, the funniest thing about them or some sort of fact that we can share. And that moment of when you try to share an idea that's generally supposed to make the audience laugh is, I think, the best way for someone to understand what timing is, because it's that empty space between sound and laughter. And if you experience it firsthand, then you start to build your own personal awareness of how you want to solve that problem.
Well, okay. I'm just kind of equating it to music, and people have often said that you cannot teach talent. And when I see certain comedians, especially the more classic comedians, the timing just seemed to be like something that was inherent in their DNA. They just had it. Like certain singers that you listen to sing, you just go, oh, wow. The types that make the angels cry, that type of singer where you just,
sure,
they were just born with it. So assuming someone was not born with it, you can actually get them to the point where they're really good?
Yeah, I think I can even do that.
Okay.
In a 15-week class, I take students of any design, and that's why I like being at the college. I also teach private workshops where the members are definitely stand-up comedians trying to improve. But on the college level, I can have students that are just taking this for an elective. They thought they were going to take something as easy as basket weaving, and then they walked into my world. And at the end of the semester, there's a final exam comedy show. And throughout the semester, they're working on being able to figure out what are they going to bring to the stage that is funny and original. And we even get into the concept of distinguished. It's not enough to be funny and original. The greatest comedians have jokes that you can identify and say, oh, that's definitely a Ralphie May joke, or that's definitely an Amy Schumer joke, or a Jim Jeffries, or that one is, you're definitely doing a Madigan right there. So I think by highlighting, not just, it's not rules, but highlighting what those of us who are really good at stand-up talk about off stage in order to get better. If I share those conversations with the students, then they end up making their own decisions about how they want to get better and rise to the occasion. And I think that's what brings out outstanding performances from folks who never plan on being a comedian again. They just want to pass their class and get an A on this final exam.
Do you ever get students that you just realize are not ever going to be funny?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, yes. And yeah, I can, walk them to the park and, like, here's what we do. And I can bring them close to the stand-up comedy experience, and I can help them make the choices that will potentially fix their jokes so that they actually get a laugh by the final exam comedy show. But in a 15-week class, I do have some that, right away have a talent that I'm helping refine. Whereas there's others, like you say, that are just, completely in tough shape. And, I can only get them so far. Like the pressure then gets on me, because in the final exam comedy show, I generally have some of my audience shows up to find out, like, can I really do this? Am I really a teacher? And so they're like, we know what you do, Bear, with your stand-up comedy, but now we want to come see what the rookies do. And when my audience laughs at the student comedians, that's when I know I'm really doing my job, especially if they're just, being original and funny.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my comparative with music and musicians. There are some people that just are inherently born with the gift to sing or play guitar or whatever. And then there's the ones that are good, but the reason that they became successful was because they put in 150% effort. There's the ones that are just so talented that their talent just floated them to the top of the heap. Those are 1 in a billion. Would you say the same concept applies to comedians? That maybe perhaps somebody who isn't quite as funny but has really worked at it would be successful over one that was just really naturally funny but didn't put any effort to
right. To me, it
themselves.
sounds like, I'm kind of almost tempted to name a name. A kid who used to open for me and then went on to win a comedy contest, and he got real popular. Hired writers along the way, never really convinced himself that he had, the talent, but he just had this natural ability, versus another kid who used to open for me and now has TV shows and as much of a gift and natural ability. But when you mention working 150%, that's the skill I can't teach, but I can make you aware of. That's the work that it takes. I started with people like Bill Burr, Dane Cook, and Patrice O'Neill. And when I try to describe to students like what we were up to when we started, was working 4 and 5 nights a week at a minimum. And that also took work, like trying to even find the stage to be on, never mind driving to it, getting there. But, talking Boston in the 90s, and there weren't comedy shows 7 nights a week that amateurs could get on, but we found our stage time. And then the constant ability or desire to want to improve is something that I think separates a lot of the people that I work with that I think are legends, and students ask an awful lot about their work ethic off stage. Like I brought up Kathleen Madigan earlier. She she's defined the art in so many ways, and maybe we don't notice it, but there's a lot of work she does off stage to make sure she's one of the greatest ever. And I can't think of too many that I've worked with that are so like supernaturally talented. Like even Tracy Morgan, like Crazy Tracy is super, like he's out there, and sometimes it doesn't seem like he's working. You can have a backstage conversation with him about how we're both ninjas, and then you're like, what is this ninja thing that he's talking about? Mm-hmm. And then you see his comedy routine, and he's like, oh, he's working on a ninja bit. And okay, we were working on the bit together. Didn't know that. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's so much hard work that it takes to becoming a master of any one of the art forms, from, I think, music on out to comedy, where even if you are like this natural superstar, at some point you're going to hit a plateau, and you'll have wanted to build some skills at building skills, so you can, conquer whatever the new challenges are.
Right. Well, I'm going back. I'm probably a bit older than you. I don't know, but I'm thinking of people like Rodney Dangerfield and George Carlin.
Yeah.
Even way back, like Jack Benny. People like that just were funny. They didn't have to say anything. They just were funny. I
agree. I agree. And then, there's a Netflix documentary about Bob Hope out there.
Bob Hope, he's another one.
What they bring up is Hope, before he was in radio and other film, was in vaudeville, and it was that being on stage every night and trying to win audiences over helped him build his pace and ability to bring up new topics and do current events jokes. Having read a little bit about Jack Benny, again, it like goes back to work ethic as much as they are a natural. I love that Jack Benny posture. I love to fold my arms and hold my chin like he does.
Yeah.
It gives you such you can, with your hand, command attention to the entire audience. I mean, they're just hyper focused on what you're doing. And he said, I love what Benny's up to, but again, I think it's that he's constantly writing. And so when an improvised moment comes up, you're actually just demonstrating your ability to write very fast by coming up with the appropriate zinger. For me, that's generally what I do. I teach from a book called Comedy Writing Secrets, and in my stand-up, if I'm annihilating a heckler or handling an improvised moment, odds are I'm just demonstrating my ability to, whip through any one of the 7 different kinds of wordplay or joke formulas discussed in that book, and, break down what is the funniest thing for a certain moment and then spit it out through the microphone quick. I would guess that with even a lot of the greats, it's how much are they practicing off stage or writing new material that also helps them stand out for greatness.
True. I don't think Benny had any material. He was one of those people where all of that crazy shtick would just be going on around him. And all he'd have to do is look at the ceiling or do that thing with his chin or his hand. And that was the capper. That was the end of it.
Oh, yeah.
He was sort of from the school of comedy of less is more. Unlike somebody, you take sort of the opposite of Benny, like somebody like George Carlin, who was one of these, really meticulous, kind of saw every little detail of every little speck of dust and told people about it. And then everybody laughed and went, oh, yeah, I do that too.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good way to analyze Carlin, and especially as compared to Benny.
Completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but both incredibly funny.
Right, and in Benny's era, they could be funny in multiple medium. So they come from that vaudeville day, and then they conquer radio, which is a different kind of writing, and then television comes out. And his comfort level at being able to be dead silent in a scene and, use something like mugging in order to generate the laughs that takes some guts.
Did you ever see the video or old film, kinescope, whatever it was, of him doing his violin duet
I don't think so. I might have, but I'm not recalling it enough to be able to or to comment on it. If you want to tell me more about it.
It's on YouTube, and unfortunately I can't remember the woman, but she was like some very, very famous violinist, and he was damn good himself, but he would always play badly on purpose to get a laugh.
Right.
And he does a duet with this woman, and it's just hysterical because he does his whole routine while they're doing a violin duet, which wouldn't be the easiest thing to do. But I mean, the eyes and the looks and
yeah. I'll have to look that up. And I love those guys in that era for doing comedy through all kinds of medium and mixing it with music, having to sing, having to dance. Those are the things I wish were still around. I like the concept of doing variety shows.
I did see your YouTube. I think I mentioned that to you at the beginning of this. There was one line that I particularly liked, and forgive me if I misquote you, but it was something to the effect of, liberals are open-minded until you think differently than them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was great because, unfortunately, I find it to be true.
Yes. Delivered to Portland, Oregon. And as commanded by Ralphie May, who, God rest his soul, is a great friend. I would assume many in your audience are fans and friends of Ralph. And we did a film together called Ralphie May Filthy Animal Tour. That was definitely one of those bits I had put in there. The inspiration is that it comes from a boyfriend of mine realizing that with his first job and paying his first real taxes, he's like, babe, what are taxes? And he was complaining that they're too high. And I said, that's how I know another gay Republican. And, Portland gets all upset. And so I say the line you said, and then I point out, like, do you want me to call them all the other gay Republicans? Do you think we're really ruining your agenda? And I will call all of them. I'm on the phone list. 2 of them I've got to use Morse code. The point is, and I think what you might be connecting to is that there are so few gay Republicans. We don't change the outcome of any election. There's no reason to boo us. We're not the ones screwing up the Republican Party. We didn't do it. We didn't elect Trump. We didn't do any of that. And if you're supposed to be this world of open-minded people, like, what is it with the instant pressure I seem to always get, no matter where I am? If somebody finds out I'm gay and a Republican, they immediately begin to crusade, like, no, you've got to be a Democrat. And it's like, whoa, I'm raised in New Hampshire, where it's a little more live free or die. And I just don't know how you're going to get someone like me to change their mind.
I want to go back to when you were talking about gay Republican, because I think in some people's mind, that's an oxymoron. What my beef is, and this is a little bit more of a serious note, is this idea of identity politics.
Right.
I don't understand it. I don't agree with it because it is contradictory to the whole idea of being an American, where we have the right to disagree, and one should not be labeled Democrat, Republican based on their race, their religion, their sexual orientation. It's up to the individual. They're pigeonholing people, and it's wrong.
Right. I agree. And I wonder if we're not at a place where that mindset will begin to change. The W. Kamau Bell just has a show on CNN, and he's talking or discovering, turns out that black people aren't the same across the United States. And
what a surprise.
I wanted to give him a round of applause. Like, it took you that long to figure that out? And it related to me, I related an awful lot to the gay community. I can, sort of get cornered at a party by gay folk who are like, how come you're a Republican and how come you don't think like this or you don't think like that? And I'm like, well, you're talking politics, and being gay just has a lot to do with who I choose to be attracted to. There's not much else required to earn the label. And I find that there's a large group of people in the country who are stuck, like you're saying, where they view you by your stereotype and then begin to make assumptions. And that can, I think that joke that I was doing in the Ralphie May movie was sort of venting an awful lot about the amount of people who have said to me, you know, you're this, so how come you don't think like that? And to me, that's just the antithesis of what I think liberty is, or freedom. Liberty is that we allow people to be who they are, and you get to be who you are. And so long as you aren't trampling on each other's rights, then off you go into the land of liberty and have fun.
Absolutely. Oh, one question I did want to ask you, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up. Is there money in stand-up?
No. That's, you know, one of the reasons I fired, say, one of the top comedy clubs in Denver. And I think one of the things I'm advocating for in the classroom is talk about the money for real, and you know, try to establish something like fair trade within the industry so that people, you know, pay comedians a human rate. Same for the artists and musicians in comedy, and I'm certain it's like this in music. There's a whole lot of people who are members of the Facebook group Bernie Sanders, or comedians for Bernie Sanders. And if you flip through there and ask them how many of them pay their opening act a living wage, you're going to be down to almost zero. You know, I can see a lot of liberal comedians present a lot of liberal junk out there on stage, and then when it's out in the box office and time to pay their opening act, they're like, well, you know, any of the money I would have to pay you would come out of my pocket. And that's really, we're having a hard time doing that, but I'm just going to go back on stage and talk about the minimum wage, and meanwhile see if I can't pay you the same rate as last year. Opening act pay at comedy clubs hasn't changed since 1990, and that's in a variety of cities and markets. The expectation that comedians, the support acts, will take on airfare plus hotel. I've recently heard of opening acts that are, you know, trying to meet people on Tinder so that they can have a place to stay for the night, which is not you know, to me, it's just not acceptable. So I, you know, point out and have a video out there called Capacity times Ticket Price equals Gross Potential, where I'm essentially just trying to teach comedians and people who book showrooms how you can look at a room and determine how much potential ticket fee is there. And I think a lot of opening acts are people who generally used to be in positions where there was no money, have heard of things like, you know, PayPal and Eventbrite, and are learning to set up their own ticket sales. So they're shifting the money away from, say, the old school clubs, and, you know, moving it to art galleries and such.
You said that the wage for the opening act hasn't changed since 1990 or something? Yeah,
at least in stand-up comedy and at a variety of comedy clubs.
What is that rate? Do you have a ballpark? Just so people have an idea?
To pay an opening, it'd be about $2. And Ralph actually has numbers in a video called Ralphie May Stand-Up Mastery, and I believe he points out $200 for the headliner, $100 for the support act, and $50 for the host. And so that's something like a 2009 film, and that really is what they were paying us back in 1992, 94 when I started. Some of the chain clubs where people might tour and play, it's $100 to be the support act, $50 to be the MC. And then one of the biggest clubs here in Denver makes new people work for free for over a year. So, you know, there's this mindset in comedy that's the way it has to be. To me, that's not what has to happen. And why I'm going back to school for my master's to try and get a master's in entertainment management so I can teach show business classes, because those are definitely they don't exist as much as there are classes like to take for acting or music or comedy, but there aren't courses in how to price out a gig.
I think that's a good idea. You need to teach comedic economics. Because
show business economics.
Show business economics. Right.
And everything from basic business skills, because friends who book gigs will tell me, even, they're like, why would I raise the money if these people are so unprofessional? So there's a whole lot to be done in order to bring the industry up. Opening acts now can sell tickets, and they've got to be able to produce the material. And this is probably this is the truth in music as well. The audience can Google who's on the show, and they want to be able to see YouTube video or some sort of demonstration of what you do, even if you're the opener. So as a new comedian, you're sort of in a race to get your first YouTube video out there, and I would assume that's the same for singer-songwriters too. Even if it's just y'all jamming in a living room, get it out there so that people who are going to your first show that are strange to you can look you up and try and understand what it is you do and evaluate whether or not they want to make a ticket purchase.
Well, very good. Chuck, we got to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we've run our time out. Thanks so much
for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It was nice talking to you. Your website is chuckroy.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so people can come and take a look at you there. You're also on Facebook and Twitter, I know, because I think we followed you. So people can also go look there. And, real quick, before we go, you have an online school, or you're starting one?
Yes. Okay. comedy101.chuckroy.com. And, we're working this summer to create online classes. So sign up for our newsletter, and you'll be the first to be included.
Super. All right, Chuck. Thank you again.
And thank you. Appreciate it, gang. Have a great day.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guests, Sharon Wilharm and Chuck Roy. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.